a special lecture that is part of our building our own Torah, our having a Torah created and creating it with and creating our own knowledge. And so we're looking at how different types of Judaism, different corners, how they deal with the Torah and how it's different, how it's the same. So we are starting today with my baby brother, Robert Sherman. He is he lives in London. He's here from London for us. And he got his master's in Jewish study at King's College London. And his major at USC was filmic writing. So it was writing films, and he's taken good advantage of that. He's very accomplished in his productions, theatrical. I don't know about film, but I have to ask him. But and that's something people can talk to him about too. But so he's been doing Kabbalah since he was about 19 years old. And it's become integral in his life. He will explain all this better than I can, but he prays with the Orthodox, but is a mystical Jew, a mystic or a Kabbalistic Jew. And with that, I give you my brother.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone here and the entire community, and Lori and John especially, but everybody who's been so supportive in inviting me here. It's really an honor to speak in front of you. This is sort of a strange thing that came to me in this point in my life. I'm now 55, and it was and I was never. I'm not a rabbi. I'm a Robbie, as I tell my students, but I've been approached by different individuals usually. Sometimes I've spoken on Kabbalah. Usually people like me to speak about Lori's and my father and uncle's experience with Disney and songwriting, which is my career, is songwriting and book writing for shows. Lori's right, I haven't done as much with film. I like theater more. It's more kind of where musical world is sort of more. But today I get to speak about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. I was, like most of the boys and many of the girls, I was in this room and in the audience at home, bar mitzvah at 13. I had no doubts. Our mother had a sort of a simple and she wasn't a simple person, but she had a simplistic view of the world, and that was that God lived on a cloud. These are her words. And it was a very simple and beautiful way, and a way that a child could understand God. By 15, I was a devout atheist. And then by the time I was 18, our father had sadly gotten Hodgkin's disease. He survived it and all, but I had a mystical revelation that happened to me. A woman, a friend of mine's mother said, "Well, have you thought about praying to God?" And I said, "Well, God," and I was 18 years old. I said, "Well, God knows everything already anyways. Why does he need to out to him?" So don't think, by the way, this woman wasn't Jewish. She said, although she probably did have a Jewish soul, we can talk more about that. But her name was Gail, and she's actually a brilliant numerologist, and I learned a lot from her on that as well. But she was a great teacher of mine. She said, "Don't think of it as that. Think of it as connection to God and to sending energy." I'm from California. We like to send energy to people. And this is a significant concept because, and I'll go much more into this, but the idea, the notion of energy transference is not something that is foreign to anybody in this room. We all have cell phones. We all use computers. We listen to the radio. We watch television, and energy transfers from one place to the next. This was prophesied in the Zohar 2,000 years ago by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and translated by his son, Rabbi Eliezer. Ben Shimon. And this notion, am I moving around too much? Is it okay? Okay.
The whole audience can't hear you.
They can't hear me, do I need a microphone?
Well, that's why we're moving the camera, because the camera is the microphone.
That's okay, I just want to make sure I'm not making your life more difficult than your wife is.
Microphone, that work better?
No, okay. Okay, good. All right, I'm not going to interrupt myself then. I'm just going to keep on going, but interrupt me if you need. There will be questions at the end. We're going to leave about 40 minutes for that. That clock, I assume, is correct. Is it correct?
Yeah.
No,
It's
How-
it's not.
about 10 minutes max.
Okay. That's a good synagogue rule. That way you get to the Kiddush fast. So what I'm going, so then at 18, I had this mystical revelation. And it was basically, I knew that my father was going to be okay. He was going to make it through this chapter, even though the doctors were not so optimistic. And I was right. And it was a feeling of certainty that I had. Now, whether that feeling of certainty is based on anything more than something I needed as a survival mechanism, I can't speak to that. I don't really know. I know what I felt at the time. I know what I needed to feel. I was 19 years old and very much needed to believe that my father would make it. I couldn't deal with the uncertainty of this, but it began me down the road, starting on the road that would study Eastern philosophy, Hinduism specifically. I learned from a man named Gurji Sankesha Vadis. I don't think we've ever talked about this, Lauren. Yeah, and it's and I went to the Church of Cosmic Consciousness, where I was very much the youngest person there, believe me. And I spoke to them about things that were on my mind, and they spoke to me about stuff. And it was mostly older Jewish women who didn't want to identify with being Jewish, as it turned out. And there's an interesting cause to this as well. The reason that you find so many Buddhists and Bujus, they call them, and people, because the Jewish desire, the Jewish neshama, the soul, has a desire and to seek the truth, to seek the light of God. It's not a logical thing. There's been different exiles. The exile that we associate with Pesach, with Passover, is the exile from Egypt. But Egypt, if you look in the Pashat, in the literal translation of the Torah, the Jews wanted to go back to Egypt. Egypt was not Auschwitz.
No.
Egypt was a place that they said to Moses, they said, and I don't have the verse memorized, but in Exodus, the Orthodox continuum, we'll be reading in about 2 weeks' time. And they say, were there not enough graves in Egypt that you had to bring us out here, Moses? We missed the beautiful meat pots that we had in the flesh. And then God looks at Moses and says, why did these people are terrible. I'm going to wipe them out and I'm going to start over. Within you, Moses, is a great nation. And then Moses says, if you wipe them out, you might as well wipe me out too. And be done with these people. And the word even has, and I forget the exact word, maybe somebody here knows it, as like Nazi or something. And the word Nazi is in this, the idea, and it's God talking to Moses about the Jewish people, about these people who hate for no reason. And to chastise, and this is one of the beauties of our Torah, is that our Torah does not paint perfect leaders. Moses had issues. Miriam had issues. Aaron had issues. All of these people, but that also doesn't take away from their loftiness. We shouldn't say at the same time, oh, Moses was this flawed guy, and so I can be a flawed person. The Zohar gives tremendous revelation on this, but I really haven't started yet with my lecture, and I want to actually dig in. I want to begin in a meaningful way. I wanted to give you a little bit of background as to where I'm coming from this. I'm not a rabbi. About 25 years ago was the first time I ever gave a lecture on Kabbalah. I was invited by a family, long story, down to Santiago, Chile, where I spoke with horrible Spanish, and they actually requested oftentimes where I spoke. I spoke a couple different places, different things, and they asked me to speak in English because it's easier to understand. Yeah, well, yeah, don't test me. You'll be very upset with me. And at the end, though, and I was speaking on Kabbalah for the first time to this group, very difficult. And I had this woman who I knew my Spanish was good enough to realize that she was adding things. And it was really annoying because I knew what I wanted to say. And she kept on throwing in her 2 cents. And I knew that she was going on a little bit longer, but that was its own story. At the end of this lecture, this lovely couple had just had a child, and it was about to be the bris, the Brit Milah. And if you understand, and we were talking about this, talking with Michael G, and said, but isn't this Kabbalah just hocus pocus? I would say to you, I would propose to you that Judaism is basically hocus pocus, and that actually you need to have Kabbalah to understand something as mystical as a bris, a Brit Milah. What are you doing? You're removing the orlah, the negative shell, this what's called a klipa, a negative shell that blocks the light from coming in, the spiritual light from coming in. Unless you study Kabbalah, Kabbalah is not meant to make it more mysterious. Kabbalah is meant to demystify Judaism. And so that you understand, what is it you're trying to accomplish with Pesach? When you celebrate Pesach, chances are you're commemorating a thing that happened 3,334, 5 years ago. It'll be 35 this year. 2 years ago was literally 3333. The oldest tradition that is continual and keeps on happening every year is Pesach, it's Passover. But what are we trying to do with Passover? Now, I'm not going to go into that today because I have a specific set of points that I want to discover with you. But on the third day, I want to discuss Purim and Passover in some detail. Today, I'm going to mostly be giving you a bit of a lexicon, a Kabbalistic lexicon, so that we can have this conversation. And this is the way I was taught. First, I was taught this lexicon. So we'll go over the Sfirot. That's the circles that you have on those pages there with Hesed, Geburah, Tiferet, and so that you can understand what these things are. I expect this to be a little bit confusing, folks. And I hope that you take this on board. The fact that this is that you should walk out of here with your head spinning a little bit, because this isn't about the transference of information. If it's a proper Kabbalah class, it should be that it's more like downloading information in binary. It's going into the computer. We're getting the rust out. Because remember, we live in what they call what the Kabbalists call an upside down world. And I can explain that in many ways. The hardest workers in our society, and I'm not a communist, but the hardest workers in our society get paid the least. The waiters, the gardeners, the people picking crops, and the people with the most corrupt people are the ones in charge. The people and the hardest, most honest people are the ones who aren't. It should be reversed. But there are other things too. In order to reveal ourselves to the world, what do? We have to conceal ourselves in clothing. This is not the way it was in the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, they walked around naked. They wanted a fruit, pick the fruit. One rule: don't go to that tree. Tree of knowledge, good and evil. Don't pick from that one. Everything else in the garden is yours, and that's the thing. So something happened at this moment, but there's something that happened before this moment. Was this an allegory? I believe it was an allegory, and I believe it's real. I think the two work somehow together. And if you need science to back this up, I would give you the simple example of the Big Bang. The idea of that something came from ex nihilo, that something came from nothing. The idea that time, space, and motion all existed, and this is allegory as much as it is science. In the same sense, this garden, this little garden, this 7-day process began, but I'm jumping ahead. So I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to give you the beginning of the world. The beginning of the world, there was a thing. Have you ever heard of the expression Tzimtzum?
Yes.
Okay, so the Tzimtzum is one of this is My first student, individual student, who I only started maybe a year and a half ago teaching, and we have Zoom meetings, he's out of Los Angeles. Son of one of my best friends from high school. And he was thinking very seriously about becoming a rabbi. And he asked my advice, and I said, but he's a genius, he's genius in politics. And he had a choice. He was asked by Karen Bass, was a Democratic congresswoman, and now she is the mayor of Los Angeles, to be her spokesperson. I said, we need good people, bright people in politics right now. I really think you should, rabbis, great job and a wonderful, noble thing. You can reach more people and be more, and he followed, somebody actually followed my advice. So I'm very proud of Ken and his work that he's doing. But I want to go back to the Tzimtzum. This is what Ken asked me, my student asked me, says, if you could explain the Tzimtzum, I'd be very grateful. He was living a year in London. I sort of watched over him because his parents were obviously in Los Angeles. And he's about 26, 27 years old now. This is about 2 years ago. And I never taught him when he was in Los Angeles, when he was in London, where I live. But I did teach him ever since then, when he was in Los Angeles. So sometimes you need to be far away to be near. I don't know. It's a strange concept, but it goes along with the theme of you have to be, sometimes in order to reveal, you must conceal. This is one of the first things that Kabbalists learn. The exact expression is in a book that we learned from called the Talmud Sefirot, which is connected to the 10 luminous, what's called the 10 luminous emanations. That's what you're looking at, the Sefirot there. Talmud Sefirot. Sefirot means emanation. Is this idea that to reveal a hand breath, means a particular measure of a hand, I suppose. You must conceal two hand breaths. Very archaic language, but this is the idea, and this is one of the words of warning that I always try and give people about Kabbalah. If you ever get somebody comes up to you and says, I'm a great Kabbalist, be very wary, because the first things that Kabbalists learn is that you don't reveal more than you conceal. Every Kabbalist I've ever had the blessing, and I'm not a Kabbalist, I sometimes refer to myself, I said, well, we Kabbalists, whenever I say that, I'm really saying this is the philosophy I follow. A real Kabbalist is a very special thing whose blessing reaches the heavens and can be answered immediately. When Moses said to God, when God said, let me destroy them, and said, destroy me first, take me out of your book. What happened? Does anybody know how that was manifest, how powerful Moses' words were? He was taken out of his book. His bar mitzvah portion, Moses died and was born on the same day. Adar, the 12th month, the 7th day, the 7th of Adar, 1 week before Purim. And the parashah in the Orthodox canon, the parashah that is his bar mitzvah portion, if you will. Of course, they didn't quite have bar mitzvahs the way we do now. And reading of the Torah, because he was only 13 when he hadn't yet scribed out the Torah, but it was a different scenario. But his bar mitzvah portion is Tetzaveh. And Tetzaveh is the one parashah in the entire book from the beginning of Shemot, Exodus, all the way to the end of Deuteronomy. So those 4 books, there's one book where the name Moses does not appear. Usually it says, Vayomer Moshe, and God said to Moses. And that's the one book you never see, and Moses' name will be mentioned 20 times, 100 times. This is the only parashah. So Moses was taken out of the book. The words of a righteous person, a tzaddik, have the power of manifestation in this world. I'm not at that level. I'm lucky if I don't have to repeat myself 5 times to be heard. Our father, Lori's and my dad, he was a man of very few words, and he was famous for, he didn't like to repeat himself, and so, but people listened, like the old Payne Weber ads, when he would speak, everybody would stop and they'd listen. If Dad would tell a war story, if dad would tell a war story, he would tell it once because he didn't like talking about the war. And I remember we were kids and I was really little, standing at the door. I was like, what are we listening to? This is, I'm not, and I always say, our father was not a holy man. And he wasn't, but there were many things about him that were like a holy man. For example, people would come in, especially as he got older, and I saw this more than Lori because I was around in his older years more. You'd see people, a lot of times celebrities would come to our door and they would come to visit him like somebody coming to visit a great rabbi or a great mystic or a holy man and coming to him for sage advice. And it was kind of weird because these people, how does he even know these people? How do they know him? That's the aura of that kind of Kabbalist. That's not me. But I sometimes refer to myself as a Kabbalist because that's the philosophy that I follow. It really isn't an orthodox philosophy, and anything. I don't think I'm orthodox at all, actually. But since they read the Torah in that framework, I tend to find myself in Orthodox synagogues on Shabbat. Okay, so the beginning. In the beginning, there was the Big Bang. The Big Bang does not contradict Judaism one iota. It's actually, I think it confirms the Genesis story. Even the idea that men and women came after animals and that before animals were, then first there was the sun and then there was, all of this, all of the creation of, if you look at the first opening chapters, but before Bereshit, where Bereshit bara, and it says in the beginning, and this is not a great translation, in the beginning, whatever the next words in English are. What are the first words? God created the heavens and so I don't read very far into the chapter. Say, what is the Kiddush on? Is it going to be chillin' today? Oh, whiskey. Oh, that's nice. And so what happened was this thing that happened in the metaphysical realm before it ever happened in the physical realm. What was this thing? It was called Tzimtzum. So what happened was there was in the endless, Ein Sof means end means end, and no, excuse me, Sof means end, and Ein, like if you spell it in English, E-I-N, I'm not sure the Hebrew, Ein means without. And this is a very specifically chosen set of two words because what it's suggesting is that words are vessels. A vessel has ending to it. This is all significant when we speak about the Sefirot. The idea that it has limitation. You can have a massive rainstorm, but you could die of thirst if you don't have something to contain it in. Now you say, well, yeah, I just hold my mouth open. Well, that's also like a cup. You need to have a vessel. If you didn't have a stomach, if you didn't have a way to hold that water, you could die of thirst in a rainstorm. So God's blessing can be all around us, but if we don't have a vessel for that blessing, we don't have a way to contain it because we are also vessels. So in the frame of the endless, there were two elements. There was what's called the light, or that's O-H-R or Ayin Vav Resh, I believe. I could be wrong about this. It might be Aleph Vav Resh. I'm not sure how you spell or, but or is the word that means light. And light is a special word that's used because light, think of candles. You don't light like love. There's no limitation. You can light 1,000,000 candles from one candle. You don't reduce the light. It can always spread. It's giving, it's sharing, it's hesed. It's what we call right column. When we discuss the Sefirot in more detail in a few minutes, you'll see that there are some things that are on the right. I haven't written out the names of this is hesed, this is Gevurah. You have it on your sheets, and that's on the right side. Then you have left column, which is Gevurah and Hod, for example, and that's what's called left column. And then there is central column, and we'll discuss all of this in more detail momentarily. But that's the reason that Rabbi Isaac Luria, who laid this out this way, he was known as the Arizal or Ari for Ashkenazi Rabbi Isaac. That's what the Ari stands for. The reason that's the reason he lays this out like this. Before this, the Sphirot historically were listed in concentric circles. With Malchut being in the center and Keter being on the outside. That was from Moshe Cordovero. Les, will we have those pieces of paper or no? No, the pieces of paper with all of the names and the biographies of different Kabbalists.
Five minutes.
If you have a chance, but there's no horrible rush.
Your computers, you share the screen.
Well, it doesn't matter because you'll get them anyways, and I'll speak and I'll talk you through them. Maybe it's better not to have them right now, and then they can get, and then they can get it later. That's fine. There's no reason to make that. There's no drama here at all. But I just thought it would be nice to have a takeaway on this. So the Tzimtzum, we started with two elements. We had light and we had vessel. The light is God, is the God force. And the vessel is us, it's desire, it's the idea of thinking, and think about this. What makes most of us, what defines us as people? Like a cup defines that it's a cup of water and not a bathtub of water. Smaller vessel, bigger vessel. What defines us? What defines us is how we are a vessel. This is from the Zohar, written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai 2,000 years ago. It was the idea that makes us human is the bundle of desires that make us up. So two people like scary movies, they become friends because they have this in common. Two people, they love the Jewish religion. Other people, it's the desire for food, a desire for attention, a desire for love, a desire for this and that and the other. These are the things that seem to define us as human beings. It's not actually the God force. The God force is just the fulfillment. It's the taste of the chocolate cake. It's not the chocolate cake. It's not how much I want the chocolate cake. That's the desire. That's the vessel. I always like to use this as an example. We have, and this it's connected to and this is really my Rosh Hashanah lecture. But I'll borrow a little bit of this notion of the man is on a desert island for, he survives barely and gets a fish once in a while, but suddenly about a month into his thing, he starts obsessing about chocolate cake. He's on this island by himself, gets rescued, brought to New York to the old deli, his favorite deli, 7-layer chocolate cake, and he's been fantasizing about this for months. He goes there, and that first bite, he reveals the light that is in that chocolate cake in a way that, as much as any of us, we might be hungry for a day, but imagine the revelation. So this is the idea, is that you have this vessel, this big vessel, all of our desires and the universe's desires. Every physical thing has an aspect of gravity, wants something, is pulling something down. So that is the left column. That's the vessel. That's the desire. So Gevurah, which you'll see on your list, if you look at your paper handouts, is on the left here. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. It is the vessel for Hesed. Hesed is giving. It's sharing. It's beneficence. It's mercy. It's rachamim in that sense. Whereas the Gevurah is strictness. It's judgment. And you can only, if you raise a child, they can get anything they want. You really want to raise the child well, though, there will be moments of strictness, and that's Gevurah. Isaac was the idea of restriction. When an adult male puts on his tefillin, he's restricting his left arm. Why? Because it's a reenactment, and it's a reenactment of the binding of Isaac, which is why it's on the left arm. By the way, this is a debate, and I had this with one of my second student, who's a lefty, and that lefties like to put the tefillin on their right arm. And they say, just because you're a lefty doesn't, anyway. But there's debate in the Talmud as well. But I'm digressing. So we have the tzimtzum, we have light, the thing, and also light is connected to proactivity. God creates; He's proactive. He's procreative. The vessel is desire related. It's receiving, it's reactive. So these are the things. So they're perfectly in unity. It's like the husband and wife of the century. They loved each other so much, perfect unity. And it's like hand in glove. And literally, a hand is the male energy and the glove is the female. And it's a perfect connection. Except for one thing. The vessel wanted to be that much more connected to the light, because that's what a vessel does. It needs, it desires. It's needed. So the light wants to give. This is all before physicality. by the way. This is all before anything, before the Big Bang. That's all caused by what's going on in the metaphysical. Like an idea is the cause, inspiration is the cause for building a building. Somebody had that spark first. So you have light and vessel. The light says you want to be creative. Yeah, you want to be proactive. You want to be the giver of light. Fine, I'm with you. Whatever you want, I want to fulfill your needs. So how does he fulfill the needs? He says, I will retract myself, the light says. I will retract myself. Instead of giving, I'm going to pull back. And suddenly the vessel says, oh my God, I'm empty. And this creates Tzimtzum. Again, this is lofty stuff because it's not in the physical realm. And this is one of the reasons Kabbalah is complicated, because, and it's a little tricky to understand, and you have to release this a little bit because and we haven't even gotten into the stuff where people are like scratching their heads and saying, what the heck was going on? It's beautiful, but when I go to my teachers' classes, everybody's beautiful, but I didn't understand a word of it. And what did he say? Tell me what he said. What was so great? And he said, it was amazing. It was the most amazing thing. I don't know what he said. I don't remember. And that's usually a good sign. I remember once we were in a class and there's this one guy and he had this very large guy and he had this terrible, you dozed up and you knew it because it snored the class. And so his name was Jack Rodriguez Cohen and he is Sephardi name. And he said Rodriguez from Spain and from the old line. And he said and Moshe Rosenberg, our teacher, he said, Jack, explain this concept. And it was a complicated thing. And he said, well, okay, and it was like he heard the entire class. It defies explanation. I was telling you earlier that there were several exiles. One exile was from Egypt. And just to finish that thought, the Egyptian one was one of physicality. That they wanted us to be trapped into the physical slave, and we were willing. I mean, it wasn't like we were above that. The harder one was the Greek exile. We just went through Hanukkah. That was a spiritual exile. The spiritual exile, because the Greeks are great intellects. Look at what the Greeks, I think the only civilization that rivals the Jews, from the time of Homer to the time of the great philosophers and the science and the literature and the dramaturgy. Amazing. And so the Greeks had plenty to give the world. And by the way, it says in the Talmud very clearly, it says every nation has wisdom. You can learn from every nation. Every nation has some wisdom. Only the Jews, though, have Torah. And Torah is beyond the logic. And so there are things that Judaism requires us to do that are illogical. It's not meant to, when you do a bris, there are things there are hukim, that are illogical things. Now, what the Kabbalists will tell you is there are hukim and then there are hukim. There are things you can understand if you study the mystical side of things. And then there are things that I still am grappling with a bit, like shotness, which is not mixing linen with wool layers and things like that. What does that mean, and what are you trying to accomplish? But certain things are not hukim, as far as I'm concerned. These laws that you have to follow, and even though they're totally illogical, because they're not illogical if you understand, like a Brit Milah. The idea that you're removing a negative shell right before you give the person a name. What is a name? You just have a Torah explanation. You have a brand new Torah that's being written for you. Inside the Torah are words. These black letter words are these very interesting things in the physical world. Why? Because they're there, you can see them, and yet they have no dimensionality. They're two-dimensional, which means that they're not really of the three-dimensional world or the four-dimensional. They're of something beyond that. And the idea is that they absorb light, they're black. And the Hebrew letters, it says in a book written by, and we'll go into these biographies a little bit in a little bit of time. You said that's 10 minutes fast, right? So I'm planning on going till 4:30. And if that's, but I'm going to stop in about 15 minutes so that we can ask questions, 15, 20 minutes. I think that gives a, no, I think I have 20 minutes. Okay, but we're gonna do that. So that's perfect time. So the idea is that these letters, it's not, yes, it's a nice tradition and it's a thing you can pass on to your children. This is not how the Kabbalist thinks. The Kabbalist thinks, what is it doing for me? How do I receive? I'm a vessel. I'm a vessel. I want things. That's no shame to wanting things in life. In fact, it's the most pure thing that we as humans can do. The angels can be all about giving. Another person not to trust is the person says, I just come to give to your community. I've just come to share. No, I want things. I mean, we want things. That's honest. That's honest. And that's what we are. We should want things. The person is either not being honest with you or he's not being honest with himself. We are, everyone here, we are human beings. So the Tzimtzum happened. And that was the withdrawal of light from the light. He said, okay, you want to be the giver? And he takes the light back. The light takes his light back. And this creates a shattering in the universe. And that's the beginning of creation. Tzimtzum. According to sorry, I'm going to pull up my notes here on this. If I could just bring you to the handouts. Thank you, Les, of the biographies. You'll see here, and we'll go into this in more detail as well, of course. The first biography talks about Abraham. Abraham Avinu means Abraham the patriarch. He is credited usually as having written the Sefer Yetzirah, called the Book of Formation. Formation is a specific name for a world above our world, the world of action. We'll talk more about that if there's time. And he lived in about 2,000 years before the Common Era. And you can read what I wrote down there. I just sort of jotted this down as notes. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but on the timeline of the Torah, he was born in 1948. In other words, 1948 years after the birth of the world, after Adam and Eve, as it were. And his birth and his revelation at 3 years old, according to Midrash, if you're familiar with Midrash, is that Abraham's revelation was that he understood that there was one God. But understand this, monotheism, as we understand it as Jews, is not the idea that we believe that there is one God.
Mm-hmm.
How does the Shema Yisrael go? Shema Yisrael, Amonai, Elokeinu, Amonai, Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one. Not that there's one God, but that the Lord is one. The Egyptians had heliotheism, belief in God, Ra. There is one God. They looked out there, God is out there. The idea of God being one, that God is one, is the idea of integrity. The idea that we have to be the same people to ourselves, that we are to our families, to the world. And that's a very important goal in Judaism. It's about integrity. It also, it flies in the face of dualism, which I would argue many religions that proclaim to be of one God actually oftentimes are dualism. People who say it's us and them, us and Satan, God and Satan, God's people and Satan's people. It justifies killing. Dualism does. And then they say, but we believe in one God. True belief in God is one. Shema Yisrael said there's a reason it's a central prayer. If I have time, I'll share with you the notion that one of my favorite midrashic passages, which we just read a couple weeks ago, about the first time Shema Yisrael was ever uttered, and it's a beautiful passage. But so the Tzimtzum, We have this moment, and then we have then we have and then we have the creation of the world. And on the sixth day, God creates the world. And and so I was telling you about Abraham Avinu and the Book of Formation. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but there is a method to my madness here. Oh, the madness to my method, which you can choose. The Sefer Yetzirah is attributed to Abraham the patriarch. You should know, though, this isn't just some attribution. There are a lot of things in life that are in this world that are attributed to so-and-so, attributed to this book or that book is attributed to such and such a saint in the Catholic religion, for example. This actually goes back. There is text. It's a very, very old text. Probably we have more information on Sefer Yetzirah. It's circuitous, but it is very real. That goes back to at least 500 years BCE, before the Common Era, so 2,500 years ago. And there are different versions. Don't get me wrong; it's not exactly a straight line. But the Sefer Yetzirah would have been 1 or 2 pages long. By the way, when they say a sefer, a book, it doesn't necessarily mean just think of a Torah scroll. It's not like when you think of it as a normal book, but and it's very condensed, and it's almost more like notes. But in that book, it says several things that are very interesting. It says, for example, it says 2,000 years before creation. 2,000 years. What is a year? It's when the sun goes around. Even thousands of years ago, we understood that the earth, or maybe we thought the sun went around. We knew that there was a cycle of a year, a 12-month cycle roughly. And yet, this book says 2,000 years before creation, the Hebrew letters had a conversation, because each one of them is an energy force. And this is Sefer Yetzirah. This is not me saying it's not some modern hocus pocus guru. This is an ancient source saying that these letters decided who will create the world. The universe means the universe, olam. And the letter Tav said, well, I could do it, except that I'm connected to Emet, and that's too strict. And I can, by the way, I can recommend some wonderful books on the subject and videos on all of these points if you'd like, as we're discussing them. Probably I can. I don't know. Depends on what you ask. Anyways, there's some wonderful background text on all of this stuff, and but this is actually fairly well known material. This is because it's Sefer Yetzirah is so written about. The best I would recommend is Aryeh Kaplan. It's a tough read, but it's very esoteric. It took me 30 years to be able to crack. I cracked open the book after about 25 years of purchasing it during COVID, and it's like, oh wow, I get it now. Okay, but it's still a page every couple hours. That kind of read. Or if it was our father, that would be 20 pages in a half an hour. But and he'd be able to talk about it. Actually, he wouldn't have this. This was not his subject at all.
No.
But
It's gonna be his comment.
no, but he did like to read some pretty heavy stuff. Just not this. And so here we have this idea of the Tzimtzum, and then Garden of Eden is really just a reflection. Remember, there's cause and effect. There's proaction and reaction, light and vessel, right column and left column. Now, so this is the story of all of us. We are each a fragment of this thing that happened. Like they say, we're stardust. We all come from stars. Well, even before that, even before there were ever stars, even before there was ever a Big Bang, there was Tzimtzum. We are part of that vessel. And within us, while we are alive, we also are channels of and housing that light from Hashem to this day, to this moment as we speak. This is us. The Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden was the first iteration of this, and it was the idea that in 7 days, when were Adam and Eve born? They were born at the same instant, really. They were born on the 6th day. And at that 6th day, on the 6th day, there was a moment that happened they were born and they were going around the garden, and everything that significant happened in Adam and Eve's lives that's recounted in the Torah. Really, Adam lived to be 906, 900 and no, it was 900, and I'll tell you why. It's related to the Sphirot. He lived to be 930 years old. And the reason we know this is because Adam was at the top of the list. And he lived to be 930, and I'll go into that when I discuss the Sphirot one. But Adam and Eve, the most important thing that happened to them was on day one. And the rest of it was kind of a slide down, okay? The Garden of Eden. I wanted to share something because someone mentioned Shabbat and Friday night. We've done, in a traditional service, you have Mincha, the afternoon service. You have Kabbalah Shabbat, receiving the Shekhinah of the Shabbat, the extra soul, the Shabbat. And then we have Mariv or Arvit, the evening service. And then we have the rabbi or whoever gives the Kiddush. They drink the wine. And what do they say when they say the Kiddush? Yom HaShishi Vayikulu Hashemayim Va'aretz, etc. It's the part I have memorized. Good at these things. And and what did they say? Yom HaShishi. Wait a second. It's the seventh day. Why are we saying Yom HaShishi? Today is day 6. And this is a secret. This is what they call a Kabbalistic secret. Because the Zohar is very clear. And this is something you can only get from the Zohar. It wasn't an apple. They're not absolutely sure what it is. But it very likely was grapes. Grapes have a particularly mystical connection. Why? What's the physical representation that they represent? You can actually see through them to their seed, because the seed is the control. Seed. If you can control the seed, then you can control. If you want an orange, but you only have an apple tree, painting the apple orange is a very toxic solution. It's not going to work for you. But if you could do genetic surgery to the thing, then you can create a new reality. But you must go into the seed level, what's called the Keter level, the seed. Keter literally means crown, and there's a connection, but it's what's called Keter, and it's above these. We'll discuss that soon. My time, I've got 5 more minutes on my clock. So what I want to ask is, can I have 10 minutes? And then, am I doing okay?
Yeah.
All right. So, but I just want to get it, because I do have a couple more points.
We're vessel.
Thank you very much for that. I'm here till Thursday, try the roast beef. So the idea of Adam and Eve, so you had 7 days. Everything was supposed to happen in 7 days. What happened on day 6 in the afternoon? Adam took the fruit and he ate from this tree of knowledge. It was the beginning of sin. Yeah, from the tree of knowledge. I hope I didn't say anything too far. And he said, and this was the beginning. This is the seed level of sin in our world. So if we've done something wrong, if we got angry at somebody, or we did something we shouldn't have done during the week, or during our lifetimes, or our past lifetimes, which Kabbalah believes in and very much discusses, and we talked about that. That thing is something that we can make tikkun, correction, for when we say Yom HaShishi, because we're supposed to go into this. We go in with a new soul, we go with a new beginning. So on Shabbat, on Friday night, Yom HaShishi, and what are you doing? Over the wine, the grapes. So that should be the meditation. You should look at the wine, you should see, and then you should see your forehead. This is the way I learned it. You hold the wine, you should be able to see the reflection of your forehead in the red wine. And you see Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name of God, the ineffable name of God, which is connected to all the different levels. And we can discuss that as well. And then, and you say the whole 36 words, 35 words, according to our result. And you go into this and this is the meditation, that you remove the sin from yourself, and anything negative is clean, not just from this week, from your entire life. Because why? Because you're connecting to the seed level. You're making tshuva for your entire life, and you start fresh every Friday night. And it's a beautiful connection to Shabbat. And I bet you never heard that anywhere before. It was revealed to me as what there's a concept where it was there are moments where somebody actually reveals what's called Sitrei Torah. It stops being Sitrei Torah at that moment. There's two types of Kabbalah. You may have heard that Kabbalah is forbidden unless you're a 40 years old, male, a rabbi, all of this stuff. You have to be super learned. And that used to be true. That prohibition was lifted about 500 years ago, at the time of the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria. So that isn't true. And part of the reason it has to do with the fact that there's an idea of a diminishment generation to generation, that if somebody was to just reveal a secret to you, you'd be able to understand. It would burn you out, if you will. It's like putting a 10 watt light bulb into a 1,000-watt site. So the idea of Sitrei Torah is the secret to Torah. But this was the reason I'm pretty sure you hadn't heard this, because I heard this from a Kabbalist as a revelation that he had. And that's why it's an amazing revelation. There are stories where people reveal too much too soon, or to people. That's one of the reasons I know I'm not a Kabbalist, because I don't get these kinds of revelations, you know. But yes, once the revelation has been made, though, it's no longer a secret in that sense that it's too much to bear. There's a reason why you're allowed to do this. And there are secrets that my teacher had received that he was able to, or actually my teacher's teacher's teacher, I should say, Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag, whose name is on that list. He spoke about the great secret that was revealed to him. Do you know what a mikveh is?
Yes.
So a mikveh is a very powerful tool. In fact, it's written, and I'm not sure exactly where, I think it's in Shulchan Aruch, that before a community can be a community, you don't build a shul first, you build a mikveh, because that's when you can create community. Very important drive. I'm actually on the mikveh building committee for my shul, because I understand this concept. It's very important. My teacher, Rabbi Ashlag, who started the Kabbalah Learning Center back in 1922, Rabbi Ashlag, and he was the one who wrote what's known as the Sulam. The Sulam means the ladder, from the word lamed, Sulam, and it's the ladder to understand the Zohar. And it's very widely accepted, except by Lubavitchers for some reason. Well, that's a whole other political story. No, I have a good relationship, but it's an interesting one with Lubavitch. And the idea of the Sulam is that you can climb. So he wrote this very, very wise. And his teacher was this strange little guy, apparently, in his synagogue, who was a businessman. He wasn't a great rabbi or anything. He was in concealment. And he said, and he knew he could see the soul of Rabbi Ashlag. And he said to, and so this, and by the way, he wasn't to be known. He was said, he must never reveal who I am, everything. And one day he said, please, and the Rabbi Ashlag was fascinated. They'd study every night at midnight, and they both were working real jobs. I mean, it wasn't like they were sitting in some lofty hotel room somewhere. You know, they had grocery stores and things like that, in very poor Palestine, 1910, 1915. And finally, the teacher said, okay, I'll teach you a secret. The mikveh of the world, and I can tell you this because it's no longer a secret. I mean, this is widely known amongst people who I went to Kabbalah school with. And it's the mikveh of the world will be complete in the Hebrew year 5760. 5760 corresponded with Rosh Hashanah, the beginning, or Yom Kippur, where you call it, Rosh Hashanah 2000, year 2000, the mikveh of the world. Well, Rabbi Ashlag's mind was like, expanded. I can't believe it. I learned this in the 1990s, so we were very excited about the year 2000. Like people were with the year, 2000 was exciting because of the new millennium, but like the book 1984, I remember I was in my first year of high school, boy, next year is 1984. Yeah, and you were waiting for them. What does that mean? Is immortality gene was discovered in, sadly, in a cancer cell, but the immortality gene was discovered in the 1990s. Maybe we'll finally crack mortality, you know, is a thing. This was a big deal to us, and it was very, you know, 2000 comes. What ended up happening though? Very interesting thing happened in the world, right at the end of 2000. I won't get too political, who got elected that year, but right at the very end, 2 weeks before, it was 9/11.
Right.
So something, and we all know, we've lived enough years since then to know the world shifted. The attitudes of the world shifted. Something, the big of the world, not just that we went into a new millennium, something that shifted. I'm not qualified to articulate exactly what it was, and you all have your own impressions of what that is. Something shifted. So when Adam sinned, it was like a mini sin soon, even though from our point of view, everything changed. What changed? Well, he what's that?
He got dressed.
Well, yeah, suddenly he was embarrassed. We had to suddenly, the world changed. Time, a new thing had burgeoned. We had 7 days, but 7 days became 7,000 years. 2 people became, well, now it's in the 8 billions. We had, instead of a little garden, now the whole world. Things expanded, a mini Tzimtzum. But it's a mini Tzimtzum compared to the entire universe being created. But from our point of view, it's pretty big because that's Grandpa Adam and Eve and Grandma Eve, you know, I mean, this idea of this expansion, but it's what we needed to, if they were supposed to get that fruit off of the tree of knowledge, good and evil. They were supposed to get it. God, because this is how the snake, and by the way, this is the thing of the snake. The snake, and I have to be careful what I say here, actually. The snake, I'd be very careful on this one. Tell you later, Lord.
Okay.
I have to be careful. I do, actually. This is a funny one. No, the snake didn't lie to Adam and Eve, or actually to Eve. The snake didn't lie. The snake told half truths. The snake said, I think there were 2 of them. Let's see if I can remember. The snake said, didn't God create all of these trees in this entire garden for you? Well, the answer is yes. Even the tree of knowledge, good and evil, but you have to wait until after Shabbat. You just have to wait a couple hours. Yom Hashishi, Vayuchulu Hashemayim Ba'aretz, the whole Seba'am. That's okay. Now I can't remember anymore. I got 2 more words. Yeah,
What are you saying?
oh, that's what we say. That's the Friday night Kiddush.
Oh.
You know, we can correct the sin of the apple or the grapes. There's a wonderful book that's put out by Chabad actually about the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria. It's called Apples from the Orchard. Peshat, and Lori spoke about this earlier about the 4 corners of Judaism. So you have this word called orchard. So not Peshat, it's Pardes. Pardes. The idea of Pardes is it's an acronym. Pardes means orchard, but it stands for Peshat, which is the literal understanding of the Torah. Fundamentalism. God said to do this, you know, he's not supposed to do this. The problem with Peshat and only taking Peshat is that is that everything, literally every commandment in the Torah, and I'm not an expert, but this is what I've learned many times, what I'm about to tell you, everything you can find a contradiction. Thou shalt not kill. But when you're murdering Amalek, we'll talk about Amalek when we talk about Purim. That's a good one, by the way. We'll get there. And I do want to leave time for questions though. What time is it really right now? Because I see 4:10. 4:04, okay. Okay, then I'm gonna wrap up this section. There's so much more to say. But I'm gonna wrap this up. Well, no, I know, but I have a lot to cover. So we've talked about Tzimtzum. We've talked about the expansion of time, space, and motion. We've talked about the vessel. The vessel wants to be more like the light. It wants to be more proactive. That's why we're here. That's why every one of us wants to be creative. We want to create something in our lives. Businessman, businesswoman, creating a family, creating a synagogue, creating a community. We want to build something. Sometimes we confuse it with legacy because legacy has to do with our mortal selves, with our physical selves, with the shell that the vessel that we are, because we feel the limitation of the vessel, especially as we get older and things creep more. You know, this idea, we want to have, they call it in writing, in creative writing, they call it the Great Immortality Project. We're all trying to build either a museum to ourselves or a legacy for ourselves or a, you know, some sort of a legacy. That's natural, but it's also connecting to the physical form, it's connecting to the vessel. The vessel, the real opportunity here is to do correction on ourselves, to perfect ourselves, to become more like the light. That's why we're here. That's the big secret. We want to be more like the light. So be more of a channel of the light. Age of Mashiach began. There was a prophecy made by the Arizal that said Rabbi Isaac Luria 500 years ago, and you'll see his name on the biographies there. And I do need to talk about all those folks, but I don't think this is going to be the time today. Maybe tomorrow I can do it. I don't know. We can discuss it.
Sure.
Otherwise I'll do it on Sunday. But the notion of the notion that the year 5600 is, if you do the math on it, the first 1,000 years is Sunday. Second 1,000 years, so from the year 1000 to 2000 is Monday. You get along with it. Thursday night to Friday night is the 6th day. That's the year 5000 to the year 5000 to the year 6000. The last 1,000 years on this scale is the 7th day, 6000 to the year 7000. That's Mashiach. That's Shabbat. That's we rest. It's not the same, but the perfection of the world reaching. But what happened in the year 5600? Let me translate the year 1840. That was the year that we reached the year on the Hebrew calendar of 5600. That's Shabbat. That's Friday afternoon. Picking some grapes. But what happened in our world, in our 7,000 year expanded world, where time, space, and motion take reign? We have the illusions that all of that implies. Very interesting thing happened. It's called the Industrial Revolution. Now, I'm going to just draw a quick picture for you. Don't worry, it's not of a penguin. That's the only other thing I can draw. And I want you to tell me what it is.
Penguin.
Usually it is.
Light bulb.
Light bulb.
Yeah, light bulb. Yeah.
1 second.
Put the film.
Yeah. Everybody says light bulb, huh?
Yeah.
So nobody sees a lady putting on her girdle. Okay, so yes, you're right. Okay, it is a light bulb. That's why I say I'm not a rabbi, I'm a Robbie. So this is a light bulb. There's one thing that's missing. You have right column. Now, this you have to understand, as simple a concept as this is to us, 200 years ago, they couldn't articulate this. You had right column, which is giving. This is where the energy comes from. That's here. You have left column, which is now I know you can just see the woman. And then you have the and then there's one thing missing, and that's the filament, the central column. What does the central column say? What does the filament say to the right column? It says, I know you want to give. I know you want to give. Hold on, just for a second, just hold on. It says the left column says, I know you want to receive. I know you want to receive. Just wait a second.
Well, yeah, for
This is Jewish law. Jewish law is a mystery. We talked about the Chukim, these mysteries in Jewish law. The central column, the filament says, is this idea of restriction. It says to the boy and the girl, male energy giving, imparting, female receiving, and I'm speaking specifically about the biology here, not because obviously many times it's in reverse psychologically and what have you. But this idea of male female energy, it says, you want to do this, but wait, just wait. A little time, like marriage, that's the concept there. But it also deals with food. What is right column? Milky products. Why milk is because it's sharing the mother's milk. It's giving. This is from a female, but it's the male energy of giving. Meat is judgment. It's like Isaac. It's receiving. It's gevurah on your sphirot. How do we balance these two things? We balance it with restriction. We say, okay, this is kosher laws. Now, some people will tell you, oh, that's a hoax. You can't understand why, or they'll give you the biblical explanation, which is fine in Peshat, if that satisfies you, the idea that you don't want to insult the mother of the mother's milk and that whole thing. I can't
They
even read.
figured out it was wrong. They did it wrong. It's like the mother's meat.
Yeah, you don't want to insult, you don't want to insult the mother, the calf, and its mother's milk, and it's an insult. Really? I mean, this is, now, I'm not here to put down Peshat. Peshat is meant to be this simple thing, but it's Peshat. These are the four corners. So we were talking about Pardes, and I know I've been jumping around, but I think that you're all with me. It's the vibes I'm getting in the room, so I hope I get good reviews here. But Peshat is the literal understanding. Remez, so this is Pardes. Remember, orchard is Pardes. So P-R-D-S, and that stands for Peshat, Remez, which means hints or gleanings. Oftentimes, Remez is things like gematria. If you know that, that's when you have numerical values. It's oftentimes referred to as allegorical, but I think that's actually, or metaphorical. I think it's a little bit misleading. I think it's Remez is more things that they're hints, but they're not quite spelled out. Then you have the allegorical, that's drosh. You may know the word drosh from midrash. There's a translation that I liked for drosh. It says metaphorical, but it literally means inquire, to inquire. So they'll have things, they'll talk about the Romans, but they really are talking about the Edomites. And so there's this thing, and then you see Rashi later on would speak about this as well. Then you have what I'm here today to talk to you about is the sod, the secrets. But again, this isn't meant to be mystical, mysterious, quite the opposite. It explains what you're trying to do. This is all about restriction. When they talk about meat and milk, when they talk about abstaining from sex until the right time, you're supposed to have sex. You're supposed to eat meat. You're supposed to eat milk. But at the right time, with restriction. Restriction is what creates a circuitry of energy, creates the light bulb. I know I gave you the wrong image with that picture. But the I know you can't see that, can you? Neither can I. So that's but this is in essence. But this in essence is the key to everything in Judaism. You look at things. There's a moment where restriction will come in, and that's how you create the circuitry of energy. In order to reveal yourself, you must conceal yourself. For the Garden of Eden, before so this is why Friday night, tomorrow night, you've got a special power from Kabbalah. You have a way to receive that you never had before. That's why this was such a revelation. I mean, I get chills when I think about the power of this little thing. The Kabbalist doesn't do Passover to remember what it was like 3,300 years ago. No, we are leaving Egypt. What is the word Egypt? It means Mitzrayim. That's the Hebrew word. It means constriction. It means the place where we have constriction. That could be an addiction that you have. Like the Jews had an addiction to the physical things in Egypt, the physical energy in Egypt. And they moved out of themselves. So what do? They use tools. What are the tools? Unleavened bread. What is bread? Bread is desire. It's a key it's a hint. And that's a whole explanation. We'll get into that on Sunday. So that's that. I'm now going to open up the floor to any questions. Let me just before I do, make sure I didn't skip something really crucial, but I think I covered most of it. Yes, just one last thing here, and then we'll talk about the Sefirot in more detail the next time I speak. I have a chance. I'm not sure what I have to hear more about what's going on Saturday, and how much free reign I have on that or not. And then we'll talk about Sefirot, And we will also talk about the holidays Purim and Pesach, Passover. And we've spoken a bit about the Kabbalistic figures, but I want to also give you a timeline of the great Kabbalists and what was revealed when, and that you have the handouts for that already. I talked to you about the mikvah of the world being complete. And so now I'd like to open up to any questions. Yes.
Yes, I have a question. I have not heard the phrase mikvah of the world to be completed. Could you explain in a different terminology what they mean by mikvah of the world?
So
Repeat,
I didn't tell you the actual secret.
repeat for the camera.
So the question was, the question is, Sue, right?
Yes.
Sue hadn't heard the expression, before, and I don't expect that she would have, that in the year 5760, that the mikvah of the world would be complete. I first learned this about 32 years ago, 1992 or so, that in this year, the year 2000, the mikvah of the world would be complete. But that expression was first revealed to the first probably about 70 years before that. His name was Rabbi Ashlag. Rabbi Ashlag founded what is now called the Kabbalah Learning Center, or the whatever the name of the institution is. Very controversial place, actually, but I did study there. And but I have to say, there's a lot of good that came out of it, a ton of good. Controversy, some of it deserved, but for the most part, I'd say I think the intentions were very, very high. And I'm very much endorse what they do. I haven't gone there in 20 some years, but I still use their Seder, and their philosophy is where I learned. So the mikvah of the world. So this rabbi heard this as a secret. So what does that mean? The mikvah, obviously it's a metaphor for something. It's not going to be a big bathtub that's made out of France. Might be useful for France. I don't know. Say France. So no, it's the idea. So what is a mikvah? First of all, a mikvah is a place that you can go in, you do a water immersion. When a person converts, male or female, they do a mikvah, and the rabbis are there, the present, and they see that it happens so that they can be witnesses. It's important in this world that you have witnesses to make an action real. We are partners with the upper worlds, is the concept. So what does that mean? It means that there's a chance to do, so what my teacher taught us was that within the mikvah was the power of resurrection of the dead. The idea that resurrection of the dead would be revealed, that the technology, however it manifests in our physical lives, but it would be the first stages of it. So we have some of that. We did see some of that. We saw incredible the genome projects and things that amazing technology. I don't think that it's fully been revealed yet, but let me explain why. And this is where gematria and the level of remez come into play. So a mikveh is, get the math right on this. A mikveh, this bathtub, is a kosher mikveh if there are 40 sa'ah of 40 sa'ah measurement of fresh rainwater that isn't impeded from the thing. It's a whole plumbing thing. And I think, and I have this battle with the mikveh committee because if people want to spend, I go to a very sort of posh synagogue, and so they want to overcharge. And I said, look, it's a bathtub with clever plumbing. Let's not spend $500,000 on this thing. If it's going to be $500,000, let's just feed some poor people with that money rather than, doing glorified bathtub. There are ways you can do mikvahs in the ocean and things like that. But let's get somebody who can do it for much, much less, $75,000 to build this mikvah. What is 40 sa'ah? So it has to be this, you can't collect the water. I don't know the exact thing, but basically the pipes have to be done in such a way that the water from the roof, from rain, and it gets collected over the year. London, it's easier to collect rain probably than it is here. But it can't be piped in. It can't be, it has to go straight in. That's basically the idea. But the key is this: 40 sa'ah. A sa'ah is 144 chicken's eggs in volume of water, generally. I guess you could have sa'ah of other things. multiply 40 times 144, it comes out to the number 5760.
Oh.
Why chicken's egg? Well, and this is amazing, because a chicken's egg, what is a chicken? Chicken is a gever, a rooster is a gever. Gevurah, look on your sphirot, you'll see left column. What happens once a year on Yom Kippur? It's the day of judgment, Gevurah. What is an orbit of the earth around the sun? And this is the amazing thing. The Kabbalah spoke about this 2,000 years ago. So, it's in the Zohar, speaks about this. I mean, this isn't newfangled concoctions. I certainly didn't come up with this. The orbit that the earth makes one, it describes it like a chicken's egg. And we know that the orbit of the earth going around the sun is not a circle. It's oops, like a chicken's egg. I don't know, I bet you don't know this, in kosher law, the eggs that are kosher are not perfectly round eggs. They're the ones that are in the oval shape. That's one of the signs that it has to be, it also has to be from a kosher bird as well, but part of what tells you, I think that's a kosher bird, this is not my area at all, but is that it's an oval shape. There are some exceptions perhaps, but that's a general rule. So that gives you a sense of the sort of the symmetry of it all. 55,760 chickens' eggs worth of this water. It has to be pure rainwater. Then you can have more water than that, but it has to be that much in order for there to be a mikvah. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
When you're talking about the mikvah of the world, to me, the mikvah represents purification. Because it's, unclean, to get yourself clean for something. So how would you use that word in the sentence, mikvah of the world, purification of the world?
Mikvah is spelled mem kuf vav he. The gematria is 151.
Thank you.
And it's the same as the word kumah, to rise. Resurrection. It's more than purification, it's resurrection. The great Sanhedrin, there a lot is made about JC from the other faith. And he was a nice Jewish boy actually.
Yes.
And the fact that he could resurrect the dead. What's not so well known is that in the Talmud, which is the same time period, it spoke about that to be on the lowest rung of the Sanhedrin, the 70 sages who were basically the ruling party, to be able to do two things: speak the 70 root languages of the world fluently. That was one thing. Yeah,
Yes.
that's I struggle with just English. And the other thing was you have to be able to resurrect the dead. So, and there's all these Talmudic stories, whether you believe them or not. The point is, the idea that JC was able to do this was not actually a big expectation relative to other people in the world. So this idea of resurrection is not necessarily such a unique concept from that time. And the Talmud, we know the Talmud existed at the time. So this is not, and certainly in its nascent existence for 200 years before JC. So there weren't this idea that, oh, that's what the proof is. Then there was at least 70 others who could do the same thing. And they talk about this in Midrash and in Talmud and all this. And it's not something that's advertised, but so does that answer your question? What was your question again?
Well, how did the mikvah of the world represent purification of the world? I mean, you have
It's more than purification. I think it's more than purification. It's the idea of resurrection. So what my teacher taught me was that within the cancer cell was the gene for immortality. Think about the mindset of the cancer cell for a second. What is it saying? What is the cancer cell saying? It's saying, I want to devour everything around me. I want to be immortal. I want to go beyond my vessel. Now, inherently, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is stupid cancer cell. Stupid cancer cell. Don't you know you're going to kill everything around you? And so one of the meditations is, do you have to control everything? Do you have to be in? So that why sometimes people are able to miraculously cure themselves by saying, something, I'm gonna throw away all the garbage and I'll deal with the other thing. I'm not saying that that's the only thing you do. God forbid, if I'm not a Kabbalist, I'm also not an oncologist, so I'm not giving anybody life advice here, but this is the mindset. You need to reprogram yourself on a cellular level to so the mikvah, what does the mikvah do? It's you're returning to your mother's womb. What happened in your mother's womb? Does anybody know where the most cancer cells exist in lifetime? Is in your mother's womb, and yet somehow the protection for water around. Water is hesed. Water is balance. Why do we not need to slaughter a fish, a kosher fish? Because we can just fish it and then it's fine. It's not like you have to bring it to the kosher butcher. Why? Because it lives in hesed. Hesed is mercy. Water is the element, whereas fire is for Geburah, is the element for Geburah. What does water do? Water seeks its own level. So when you get to the mikvah, one of the things you have to do, and if anybody really wants to know more about mikvahs, I can tell you what I know. That's a whole other thing. I've tried to get my students to do mikvahs, and it's like one of them did it, but getting people to do mikvah, because it really is a rebirth. You know, the baptism thing, and I've always tried to find linguistic thing. John the Baptist, clearly, they were doing a mikvah, and clearly that was what was going on, but I've never found the connect, because neither wants to really give credit to the other. Anyways, so it's more than just a purification. Yes, it's a rebirth, but the meditation should be that, well, I'll tell you plainly, there's many different numbers of mikvahs that you do. So like, for example, you go, like must do it at least twice. The first time you dunk down, one of the things you have to do, and you can't see it, so you don't know, you should lift your feet up from the ground for at least a second. So you're completely surrounded, and you should think of yourself being inside your mother's womb, where there's absolute hesed around you, all around you. And for an instant, you think this, and the first meditation is that you remove, like the tzimtzum, you remove all the light you have, remove everything. And you should exhale all of the air. You should open your eyes so that the water gets everywhere, and then come up. You know, this is in an instant, right? You have to sort of go in with the right thoughts. And then the second time, you go down and you receive all the new light. The biggest problem with sin, and this is what tshuva is, you know, I'm sure you've all learned, tshuva is not when we do Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and we have the month of the Elul, and we're doing this idea of, it's not the idea of repentance. It's a Christian notion, repentance, coming from the Pentecostal thing, which is also from a Jewish concept, because it's the 50th day after Pesach, right? But it's not that. It's not about repenting. It's about, it's actually about returning. Returning to the moment that you committed the sin or the negativity. So we talked about the man with the chocolate cake. Desires chocolate cake. He has an empty vessel. I love chocolate cake, but the problem is because I ate lunch. I'm not so hungry that I can truly reveal all the way. Light wants to fulfill you. God wants to fulfill you. Our problem is we're all these vessels. Think of a table filled with glasses. This one is for money. This one is for recognition. This one is for love. This one is for seeing a scary movie this weekend. This one is for getting some good sushi. All of these different things, these vessels. Problem is, what do? We fill these vessels up a little bit. You can't truly reveal, if I teach you nothing else today, you cannot truly reveal light unless you have the empty vessel, the craving. That's what reveals the light, and that's what Hashem wants. Now, does that mean we have to suffer? We have to become ascetics? We have to become stoics, you know, this kind of a thing. We're totally empty of all, devoid of it. No, but you have to have the prayer of the truly poor person. So when King David, we'll talk more about King David, because he was what's known not just as a vessel, but as a chariot of the Sphira of Malchut, of the bottom Sphira here, of Malchut. There was a moment when he's running away from King Saul, who wanted him dead. He didn't even have the shirt on his back, and he's praying the prayer of the truly poor person. I have nothing, God. You have to fulfill everything. If you say, but we all have fairly nice lives. Okay, this is bad. This is bad. There is nothing you can do right now to ensure that you'll take another breath.
Mhm.
You need God right now, or you need something. If you don't believe in God, there will be people who don't. That's fine. You need somehow the thing in the universe that sustains you to give you another breath. So that is the prayer of the truly poor person. My prayer book, which is a Kabbalah Center prayer book that I pray out of, is called Tefillah Le'ani, the prayer of the truly poor, of the poor, literally poor. And that's the thing. So when you do that mikvah, that second dunk, have nothing. First of all, you've literally emptied yourself out. You can't stay there anymore. And then come up, gasp for air, come back down, and now all the light comes in. That's the meditation for a mikvah. Any more questions?
Do you feel that when you do it?
Okay, so I'm not the guy, I used to really annoy me, especially in California. In London, nobody's in touch with their feelings like me. So it's fine. No, I am not the guy, I'm not the, but in California, people say, wow, I felt the light, I felt so much energy. I feel more out of a good steak dinner. I really do. I find meditation difficult. To be honest with you, it's not. So do I feel like, yes, I do. I'll tell you, it helps with the extra stimulus. So like, for example, a cold mikvah, you will feel it. As opposed to a nice, comfortable, warm mikvah. They say you get extra bonus points for a cold mikvah.
Yeah, as I say, when I did the mikvah, I wasn't told about that. But just the Shehekian was all I was told to.
No, they're not gonna tell you.
They're not gonna tell me that.
Well, they're not gonna know. They're not gonna know. This is Kabbalah. Most people don't, you have to remember, there's a prejudice against Kabbalah for decades. The teacher of my teacher, which is Rabbi Philip Berg, he basically, he couldn't have walked into an Orthodox synagogue, a regular Orthodox, but he was in good company. The Baal Shem Tov was almost ostracized from the Jewish religion. So there's that. Did I answer your question?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna go back to your bibliography here.
Oh, sure. I'm gonna go into much more detail. I'm happy to do it today.
You have Moshe Leon as Moshe Ben Shem Tov, and you just mentioned the Baal Shem Tov.
I also have the Baal Shem Tov there too.
That is,
Don't read, please don't read too much into those. That's all, those are literally my notes just to be able to ramble off some years. And I thought it'd be a nice sort of take home. My idea was first I would give you, and if you have time, I'm more than happy I can do this in 10 minutes with the names. I just didn't want to, if people had to leave at 4:30, I didn't want to, and I can do that tomorrow if there's time. Do you want me to go on a little bit more? I'm not insulted if the answer is no. You don't care? Do you want me to?
It's fine.
Okay, all right, well, let me go into these folks here because
There's nothing tomorrow.
basically what I want to do
There's
now.
nothing tomorrow.
Is that okay, Les? If you're all right with that?
Yeah, but what's tomorrow?
Not tomorrow.
Oh, good.
Saturday.
Oh, good, because I'm not on the schedule for tomorrow.
Well, that's because we didn't, Les wasn't supposed to know, guys.
Ah.
All right, I wanted to give you, I also wanted to give you a historical sense of sort of timeline, who sort of these sort of the great rabbis were, and also one or two that aren't so great here. But it gives you a little bit of sense. By the way, I'm skipping over some really important names. This is just as I was putting together my notes, and I thought, well, I'm going to mention Rabbi Akiva at some point. I'm going to mention Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yochai for sure. And I thought, okay, well, I'll need to talk a little bit about them. I couldn't remember years. I always sometimes get the centuries wrong. So we talked about Abraham Avinu, means Abraham the patriarch. He is the one we already spoke about him, and you can read the years there. Obviously, everybody knows who Abraham is. We talked about him being the first person to recognize that there's one God. Of course, before then, people said, well, there's a God of this and a God of that. Problem is that these gods and the idols, by the way, we know more about Abraham and his early life, much more from Midrashim. And there are many people who take it the Torah very literally and say, we don't trust. Orthodox Judaism says, no, it's oral Torah. At Sinai, we were given two Torahs. We were given oral and we were given written Torah. And the written Torah is the Torah. And then the oral Torah is the oral traditions, the Midrashim. All of these things were passed down. in a very methodical way, and you should know that the rabbis, they had an ability to, and to this day, and I've seen it, and it's kind of spooky, where because on Shabbat, a great rabbi isn't, you're not, or, Mike is speaking, and there'll be people who are trained to remember every word that they say, in a way that they can read after Shabbat. Their job is for the next 3 hours to type out what that rabbi said, because you're not allowed to tape record them, you're not allowed to, right? So the idea that it was transmit this generation to generation. 2,000 years ago, destruction of the Second Temple of Bar Kokhba, a revolt, and all of that occurs, and something very significant happens. And that is we're sent out to different, the diaspora happens, and there was a real fear that it would all be lost. This is, by the way, when rabbinic Judaism really took its hold. The Pharisees became what are known now as the rabbinic Jews. And we now live in an era in the last 2,000 years, basically where rabbinic Judaism, even if we're not all Orthodox, this is an era of, basically Judaism has been redefined, certainly from a cosmetic sense. Moses would not recognize what we do. You did, okay, every week you're gonna get together and Torah, and you're gonna have this, and you're gonna. So, and Midrash, was in a different form, but, anyways, but I'm sure he had good shulim too. Anyway, so what was I saying? What was I talking about? What was, I'm reading these, I'm very sorry. Okay, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm still with you guys. Okay, so this is Abraham. Now, Rabbi Akiva was a great, was likely the greatest soul that ever lived. So Midrash is, I always say Midrash is to the Torah is to the Midrash. I'm talking about the Peshat, literal reading of the Torah, is to Midrash like what's the thing that we all cheated from, the crib notes from school?
Cliff notes.
Cliff notes, thanks, Cliff notes, right? Cliff notes. And it's like what Cliff's note, the Torah is like Cliff notes. And the Midrash is like the Torah, or the Midrash is like the actual
You
book,
gotta go.
because it fills in all the blanks. It gives colors
That
to
was me.
stories. So for example,
Thank you for helping.
Adam and Eve, and then they have Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel, and then Adam decides to, and then you read in the Bible and it says, and Adam decided to reunite with his wife after 130 years, with Eve after 130 years. And this massive jump, Midrash tells you everything that happened in between. He saw that there was a sin that went on from this lustful behavior because he just sort of lusted for no reason. And so then he said, I was separated from my wife. And then he created all these negative angels, and this happened, and this happened, and this, and that 130 years. Then we learn later on, it connects again. This is where the Zohar comes in, and this is the Sod. Because, okay, that's a nice story, that's interesting. Then we get to the highest level, the Sod, secrets. Jacob goes to, after being reunited with Joseph, goes down to Pharaoh and he says, I have lived 130 years. It has been difficult. And he tells all the people, and it sounds like he's right. It sounds like he's Peshat level. It looks like Jacob is a really whiny guy, really whiny. No, he has done what he's saying. This is only from the Zohar, 130 years. I've made tikkun for the 130 years because Adam wasn't supposed to be away from Eve that 130 years. He created negative angels in that process. And so what that is a clue, and that's the level of Zohar, because it's the revelation. It doesn't make it more secret. It's revealing the negativity. So all of these levels are wonderful. And the way I like to do this every week, I don't have the time these days, unfortunately. When I was in my mid-20s, I did this religiously, literally, every week. I don't like going to services, it's not my thing, but I loved reading midnight. So I read the Torah reading first, and I do that on, let's say, a Sunday morning. Then on Monday, I read all the Midrash. Maybe it took me from Monday to Tuesday, and I do that. Then I read the Zohar part and say, wow, now I understand what, and all it says in the Peshat is 130 years went by and Adam reunited with Eve. And suddenly there's all these people in the world. And some of them are really bad and some of them really good, coupled. So that that gives you that sense. Now, Rabbi Akiva. So there's a wonderful bit of Zohar here. This is a wonderful thing. So the burning bush, we all know the burning bush story. Right? You're familiar with the burning bush. Moses goes to the burning bush and what's just happened? He found this little sheep that had wandered away. I think it was a lamb or whatever it was. And then God says, you took care of this. Is after years of trouble and hard life, after having a prince in Egypt. And you took care of that little sheep so well, so nicely, so beautifully. How much better will you take care of my people? Beautiful thought. He says, that he's asked to, it's very touching, very moving to me. He says he's asked to remove his shoes, which is a sign of death. Because, and that, by the way, in Jewish law, you're allowed to keep everything. You're not allowed to keep the shoes of the person, because that person has walked his path. This is the tradition. That's true. You shouldn't keep shoes. That person has walked his path. You have to get rid of. And there are people who, that's the one thing they couldn't get rid of, was the shoes. When we talk about shoes, we talk about feet and malchut. There are certain things in the religion that's not just custom, it's actually halakha. Like, for example, on Tisha B'Av, one of the fast days, you're not supposed to wear leather shoes. Leather belt, no problem. Leather watch, pig leather is a thing, not a problem. But no leather shoes. Why? Well, we can discuss that. I don't know if there's time for it, but I'm happy to do emails. Or a Zoom, or we can do a Zoom call. And so but it's a very interesting thing. And when you understand that, you understand why, because it's interesting. Tisha B'Av, the most negative day of the year, Yom Kippur, the most positive day of the year, and the rules are almost identical. No leather shoes, and they're doing two exact opposite things. But again, I didn't go all day on just that. So Rabbi Akiva. So Moses goes up to the burning bush, and the Zohar explains about says that Moses argued with God. He said it wasn't just that they're having this. It says, what we learn is, he wasn't worthy. He didn't feel worthy. Great. He said, but no, the argument wasn't that. The Zohar says, he said to God, he said, I'm very enlightened, basically. He could see souls. He understood what was going on in the transmigration of souls and all of this stuff. Says there is a greater soul in the world than my own. That greater soul is Rabbi Akiva. He won't be born for 1,300 years, but he is a greater soul than I. And he should be the leader. That soul should be born. He should be the leader of the Jewish people, not me. And God said, look, I'm God. I'm telling you, you need to do it. And that was, and why was that? Because Moses lived 120 years. Rabbi Akiva lived 120 years. First 40 years of Moses' life was, he was decadent, lived in Pharaoh's Egypt as a prince. Then he was exiled. He went to Midian. He got imprisoned by the man who would be his father-in-law. He married the Midianite Jethro, Yitro, his daughter. 40 years go by. And then at 80 years old, he becomes the leader of the Jewish people. 40, 40, and 40. The exact same thing happened with Rabbi Akiva. He had 40 years. The way he's described is he was a bum. That's the way it literally describes Rabbi Akiva. He lived about 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Akiva. And then another 40 years he learned, he studied. And then the last 40 years, what was he? He became the great Rabbi Akiva. He was they were like two counterparts. What's going on? They were the highest, both of these men were the highest aspect of the souls of Cain and Abel. Cain, this is the Zohar. This is the secrets. So Cain was the soul, and actually, this is, even though it's the Zohar, it's actually revealed by a different Rabbi Isaac Luria, who I didn't write much here. Again, these are just my notes that I sort of copied from the internet, so I can ramble on things, but I will talk more about him. Rabbi Akiva was the soul of Cain. Now you say, but wait a second, why? He's the higher soul. Wasn't he the murderer? Cain was a murderer, right? Well, again, we come from the Tzimtzum. We come the vessel, the thing that in the age of Mashiach, when immortality exists, when somebody dies, we can resurrect them. Time to come. But when you're able to do that, murder, well, okay, it's not such a bad thing because you can just resurrect the person. it's the closest you can, only God can create. But the closest you can come to doing that is murder. So even the most negative sins, well, because it's taking a life. I'm not saying from our perspective, yes, it's horribly negative. I'm not suggesting people should go out and murder, but we live in the upside down right now. It's the idea of the tremendous desire. The bigger the vessel, the bigger the capacity for light, the bigger the desire. So somebody has this, doesn't mean that it's right. I mean, people, I'm not suggesting to become friends with the murderer, but if you look at the people who receive the most, that's why we live in an upside down world, because these people, they go the wrong way. Things are always, they're mixed up, but the more desire a person has, the more light that can be revealed. The Zohar says what makes the Jewish people, is not that they're closer to God. Because look, there's some really nasty Jews out there, but there are also some wonderfully beautiful Jews, out there. The thing is that what makes a Jewish soul isn't who your mother is, surprisingly. It doesn't say that. And in fact, in history, sometimes it was through the father. The idea of conversion started with the mother. How do we know that? We know that it was matrilineal, historically, very simply. You don't have to go.
Right.
Sarah, Abraham had two wives, Sarah and Hagar. The Jewish one, they had Jewish kids. That's how we know historically. By the way, that's from Jonathan Sachs. That's not from me. And it's a straightforward conversation. That said, there were times that it was patrilineal, that it was decided, like other religions. But again, it's not really about that anyways. It's about the bigness of the soul, the bigness of desire, the bigness of the soul. That's why Jews want more, and it's not a bad thing. It's the idea. And if you look at Sinai, you know that the 10 utterances, not commandments, because they're not commandments at all. They're uttering. It's God uttering. The commandments, a convenient word that's misleading. They're not sav. They're devarim, words, utterances. Eser dibrot, the 10 utterances. Another Kabbalistic secret, but it's there in plain sight. It's just people skim over it because of what they learned. We have the ability to lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Anybody?
Talking about 10 utterances.
Yeah, before that, just before that. 10 utterances. You're talking about. Anyways, I'm gonna skip to the next rabbi here. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say the next thing. So Rabbi Akiva, he was the highest level of, and by the way, Rabbi Akiva was the child of Roman converts. So it shows you conversion is not a bad thing. The highest soul in the world. Now, but you say because Cain and Abel is tikkun. Abel is Havel in Hebrew. He's tikkun. There's two sides. There's tohu, which means chaos, and there's tikkun, which means correction. The world of chaos, the universe. I mean, we don't know how it goes on forever. It's beyond our perception because we're little vessels that see things, and we want things to be sort of limited in a way. It's easier to digest. We can see a year in front of us. We understand how it's when things are unlimited that we say, oh no, you got 1 million years. It's kind of it's more than we can handle. If we were an unlimited body, cancer wouldn't be an issue but the problem is we're limited. We need our organs and we're there. So right column, the higher column, the giving, the side that's connected to the light, is connected to chaos as well. That's why sometimes the greatest things that can happen in our lives is when we have the blessing of it seems like it's the most chaos, but actually we learn more from that. More light is revealed. There's a great saying. There are 613 precepts in the Torah, right? And the 613 and there are positive precepts: do this, do that. And then there's negative precepts: don't do this, don't do that. The positive ones, actually, they're positive. They're good things. one of the positive precepts is to get a get. To get a divorce. Now, it's not saying everybody who's happily married should get divorced. But if you get a divorce, think about the light that is revealed in a marriage, in your life, what you learn about yourself. Does it make it easy? No, not easy. But you grow as a vessel. Part of the way you grow as a vessel, think about exercise. It's by breaking the vessel a little bit, and then you grow. Not recommended to everybody, but that's it. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva lived a very difficult life. And I can tell you why Rabbi Akiva was the greatest soul. There are things about what he was able to see in his life was he was able to see the positivity in the most negative situation. He said when he saw the sacking of Jerusalem, he smiled and he laughed. And he said, and they were literally peeling off his skin. This is recited during Tisha B'Av, during the fast day of Tisha B'Av. Rabbi Akiva, he sees foxes on the Temple Mount. Maybe are you familiar with this, where he says he sees the foxes and he smiles, he laughs, because he knows that if that part of the prophecy was that Jerusalem would be destroyed and it would be rebuilt again. The greatest soul ever. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was his student, and he was the one who created the Zohar. I'm going to just rush through these now. The Zohar was created. He was running away from the Romans. In order to sublimate his body, he lived in a cave for 13 years. He spent all day buried up to his neck in dirt. It's a very aesthetic life. The Zohar came out in 70 AD, the year 70 Common Era. And it was concealed from the world for 1,200 years, as was prophesied. And it was rediscovered by Moses de Leon in France, I believe. No, Spanish, it's Spain. And he's a very controversial Kabbalist. They usually are, the good ones. And because there is as much evidence that maybe he just made it up, but the thing is that I've studied this stuff. I wanted to actually do my dissertation on this, but I didn't feel I had the linguistic prowess to do a convincing argument, and the academic world doesn't if you can dismiss the Zohar, but the thing is, I don't believe that the Zohar had to be written down to have been remembered. So the idea that he may have used modern 13th century language, this is my belief. The fact that he may have used a few common things. Yeah, he probably wrote down what he had learned. And it wasn't that it was sitting in a chest under his bed and his father's bed and whatever his teacher's bed, before him for 1,200 years. No, it would have disintegrated. It would have been burned down when a house burnt down or whatever. But he revealed what had been taught, father to son, rabbi to teacher to student, mother to daughter, that kind of thing. So that's my belief on that. And there's interesting, the best evidence to me is that it's left to be a secret. It's not meant to be fully argued away. There's as much evidence for it being legitimate as it is against it. Moses de Cordovero, he lived in Sfat, my favorite place in Israel, amazing place. And the bottom of page 1 of the autobiographies, and he was the teacher of the next guy, Rabbi Isaac Luria. Isaac Luria was probably the greatest Kabbalist since Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He certainly made the Kabbalah accessible and became the foundation of everything that came after that. And I only have one sentence there because I could speak on him all day long and have more to say. He was an amazing man who, there are people who know because Sfat is this amazing little city in Israel. Has anybody ever been to Sfat? Sfat in Israel. Safad is sometimes called. And it's on a mountain. It's the closest thing you'll find to like Indian spirituality.
Tell them the last time you were there.
I was there over Sukkot. And I was there twice in the last year, actually. I'd never been there before. It was always just a dream.
I had friends that moved there.
Oh, it was Sukkot, and the final day of Sukkot, or right after the next day, was Simchas Torah and also Shmini Atzeret, and the war started. And it was, and this was one time I felt it, whatever, it is. I felt something, and I mean, it was amazing, powerful, and there was somebody had heard, there's a little skirmish in the south, and it's really bad this one. There's always something happening, I mean, there's terrible things that happen in Israel all the time, and, no big deal. Then I get back to my hotel that night, and they say, and there's a Druze guard, by the way, the Druze, which is an offshoot of Islam, they're the most loyal. Some of them are absolutely heroic people. It's not just that the Jews are the good guys. There are a lot of really great people, the Druze. You know them because they've got the William Howard Taft mustache. They've got big, thick mustaches. It's part of their culture. And they're very secret. You can't convert to being a Druze, but they're lovely people. There's this little guy who obviously was in the Israeli army a million years ago. I'm thinking if like some Arab guy, like 20-year-olds come here, they could 3 of them would ambush this guy. Even though he got a little pistol, he doesn't even have, and he was guarding the hotel. Everybody from the hotel who was working the hotel had left. It wasn't like it was that. This is a little mountain town. This isn't, but there was a staff. And it was a very strange thing. Now, thank God I was never actually in danger, but I didn't know that until I got back home. About 3 days after I got back home. So the way I figured it out finally is I never heard sirens. Because there would have been sirens, bombs going, but we were only about 12 miles from the northern border, and it has Hezbollah. And I got to tell you something. And I don't mean to get political here. I'm sure that I don't know what everybody's politics are, but I'm going to say this. Thank God for President Biden, because he immediately brought in whatever the big ship,
Yeah, right.
to the door specifically. And I say this for myself personally because he made sure that the Hezbollah in Lebanon knew don't start anything on my watch. And a lot of people, especially in the Orthodox world, I see the time, so I'm going to just wrap this up. Are there any more questions? Because I can do this also on any other time that I'm here. Any more questions? No. Okay, so the Arizal, he was famous. He lived in Sfat. He became the teacher even of his own teacher. He only lived a couple more years. And there's a great lesson he once taught. He said, his student said to him, Rabbi Chaim Vital said to him, how is it that you, at 38 years old, he died at 38, how is it in your life, and his students were all older than he was for the most part. And he said, how's you were able to achieve so much? And he said, what? Very simple. I was always happy in what I did. And the message is, we think of happiness as a reward. It's not. It's a tool. Think about how much easier it is to do a thing when you're happy. We think of it that we have to be, sometimes we feel guilty, so we can't feel happy. But happiness is not meant to be a reward. It's meant to be a tool. You should be happy in your life, even when there's things to be sad about. Obviously, when you're in mourning, you should find happiness in things. That's why you don't cancel a wedding just because somebody died. That's the ruling on that kind of thing. So now, Israel ben Eliezer was better known as the Baal Shem Tov. Interesting man. He completely resuscitated. Oh, I skipped over Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi was the bad guy. That's why he invented him. He lived around the same time as the Great Plague of London and the fires. In fact, there were a lot of Jews who went down to Turkey to be with their Messiah. He was a false Messiah. He was completely took away all of the hope and there became tremendous that exists to this day, doubting of people who were these amulet salesmen who would sell, and the reason, and they would sell the name of God, and people who were hoaxers and things like that. The name Baal Shem Tov is very interesting. Baal Shem, that was the people who sold amulets, and the Baal Shem Tov. No, this is the good guy. He knows his stuff, and he was amazing. He resuscitated mystical Judaism, and in a time when there was not a very large population of educated Jews in the world, and Judaism could have died on the vine. Back then, we have the Baal Shem Tov to thank for all Hasidism. Every one of the great Hasidic lines come directly from the Baal Shem Tov, who also borrows from the Arizal, not borrows, basically. One of his great students was Shneur Zalman of Leadi, who was the founder of, or also known as the Alter Rebbe, from the Lubavitch clan, and he did an interesting book. It came out in 1796, the end of the George Washington's presidency. And the reason this is significant to me is this is a battle that I have constantly, very friendly battle with the head, the retired head who I take a class from every other Sunday. Of Lubavitch in UK, in the United Kingdom. And I take a Zoom class. He's an older man now. And he believes very much the Tanya is the only way to learn mysticism. And it's the only way. Everything else is diminishment and everything. And my belief is no, you needed to have 5,600, right? The Industrial Revolution. Why? Because they didn't understand the idea of, if I said to you, I'm sending you positive energy, no, it has to be this mystical thing. So I described the idea of the expansion, for example, of this, of the Garden of Eden into our world today. The idea of the expansion of time, space, and motion. And I think everybody here based on your body language, you understood me. You understood me, right? At home?
Yes.
I'm also looking at you, I'm looking at you. And if anybody's still there. And okay, good, it's you. How many are there, by the way?
Only.
Right now, there's 3. There was
Okay,
4.
that's good. That's absolutely.
So you will watch later.
No, there
Okay.
were 2.
Go back to it, because
It's all good.
There are 3.
By the way, this
There
gentleman,
was 4.
who was my teacher, he suffered with depression, and because people weren't taking to his classes, I wanted to tell him, well, you should update it. But no, because the problem is, in the time, you couldn't have this conversation, going back to what I was saying, you couldn't say, I'm sending you energy. Prayer was something that was mandated to do, because we couldn't understand, you couldn't have had this conversation even 50 years ago in the same way that we can have it now. The idea that millions of cell phone waves are going through us right now. I don't understand how it works, but it works. And the idea that you can make these connections at the speed of light. This is preparing us for Mashiach consciousness. By the way, a lot is made about Mashiach, Messiah is the translation. Because we live in a Christian society, dominating society, and when people talk about Mashiach, what are they saying? They're saying they say the Savior, the person who's going to resurrect us. That is not a Jewish concept. Mashiach, word Moshe, Moses, comes from Mashiach. It means the anointed one. One who's anointed, like the Queen or the King of England now. They anoint him with oil. That comes from the Catholic Church, where the Pope, when he's made Pope, they anoint him with oil. They put oil on his forehead. That comes from when Jesus, they anointed him with oil. But then that comes from King David and King Saul. It's part of a Jewish club. And but Mashiach was not about resurrection of the dead, and it wasn't about saving the world. It was just the anointed one.
That's what I understood, they were supposed to go. The Messiah was somebody who was not a god or
Right.
anything, just a really good human who elected the Jewish people into Israel.
And they say every generation has a Mashiach, actually 2. Mashiach ben Yosef, meaning it's hard to translate this one. It's not from the nation. There's a lot of discussion that Napoleon was Mashiach ben Yosef, but there's more judgment connected to that, meaning Messiah from the house of Joseph. And then Mashiach ben David, which means literally from the house of David. And that's the house of kingdom. And sometimes that person in both generations it's concealed, but the majority of generations, it is concealed. When we read in the book of Ruth, that's the thing. So just finishing this off. So then came the rabbi who is my lineage of learning, is Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag, and I spoke about him before, and he was the one who basically started the Kabbalah Center where I learned. And with that, unless there's any more questions, I'd just like to thank you very much for your.
Thank you.
I hope I.